They were not ashamed. They were not ashamed of massive discrimination. They were, I mean, I remember going to a big rally, one of the earliest ones in New York City, on behalf of first responders who were being fired because they would not take these mandated, totally experimental injections whose trials were still underway till 2023, right? This was 2021. And there was no evidence that they were safe. They were experimental. It was an emergency use authorization. They had not gone through the normal FDA approval process. And reasonably enough, some firefighters and police officers and emergency healthcare workers didn't want to be the guinea pigs, and they were being fired. Their kids had no, food to eat. They didn't know how they would pay their mortgages. And I remember going down to speak at this event, and I looked out over this sea of New York City firefighters and police officers and people who come and save you when you've got a heart attack, EMT responders. And I was like, where is everyone from my world? They're all supposed to be here. These people help them. No one showed up. All the good liberals were fine having the police officers and the firefighters who would save them if they were being robbed or their house was on fire or their kids were in a burning building. These guys and girls would run in to save their children. My peers were fine letting this be done to them. And it was so elitist and so disgusting. So
your mind must have exploded.
It was so hard to process. And it wasn't just like a handful, it was en masse. It was like everyone was in a cult. And it was a cult of in which they were abandoning all the ideals that they had professed and that I had admired. Why I was a liberal is we don't do things like that. We don't sacrifice whole classes of people. But I guess we did.
Why do you think you were in the tiny percentage who wouldn't go along with it?
That's a hard question. I guess, I've never gone along with anything, that shouldn't be gone along with.
I know the feeling.
But I guess I'm lucky.
So you didn't get that far in the Girl Scouts, is what you're saying.
I don't think they would have had me. But, I think I'm lucky for a few reasons. I mentioned how great it was. Like, a lot of marriages ended during this time.
Yes.
I had someone beside me who, was supportive.
Amen.
I know. I'm so lucky. Yeah, we're very lucky. But also my grandmother, Faye Goldman, wherever she is, bless her, she was an absolute, she believed in this country. She was a patriot, and her mom was, a 16-year-old Russian immigrant. And, I'm the daughter and granddaughter of immigrants, and she just fiercely believed in this country, and she didn't put up with bullies. And so I guess she just raised me to be aware of when this country was veering away from freedoms of speech or, democracy, liberty. That's what, my family had fled the czars and, fled Germany on the other side of the family to escape. So I recognized it, the stench of it, the stench of fascism and totalitarianism.
But you share that with probably 6 other people I know, almost that exact family story in a history of principled nonconformism, which I have always admired. And none of them went to the first responders protest.
Ugh.
So it does, no, I'm not attacking them, it is interesting that it still doesn't quite explain why you wound up in the place that you did.
I understand that I'm believing in and behaving according to values I've always had. I don't understand why people around me who profess the same values turned all at once. They were being heavily propagandized.
Yes. But these are, how honest you want to be, these are smart people.
I know.
You know what I mean? And they're certainly well-educated people.
I know. I can't explain it. You, I'm sure, are aware of Dr. Michael Nell's book, The Indoctrinated Brain, and I think some of it is, I can only speculate, Tucker, but people were isolated, and as I wrote in my last book, The Bodies of Others, isolation is a way to break down prisoners, and it's a form of torture. and it changes the brain. And so people who were isolated and being propagandized nonstop that, we're the ones endangering everyone, or those first responders who won't get vaccinated, they're the ones endangering everyone. They believed that you should fire the first responders because they're endangering everyone.
Yes.
Everyone was lying at that point from the top down. The CDC was implying or stating that vaccination stops infection. Rachel Maddow said that, the virus stops when you're vaccinated, as I recall. I don't have her exact words in front of me. The president was saying, if you get vaccinated, it stops the virus. All the language implied that we were the ones endangering everyone, endangering children, endangering grandma. So
let me emphasize that if you are vaccinated, you have a very high degree of protection, and therefore you do not need to wear a mask.
This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. The unvaccinated overcrowd our hospitals.
Well, guess what? How about patriotism? How about making sure that you're vaccinated so you do not spread the disease to anybody else?
Carlson, should we have any worries about walking by someone on the street who may be unvaccinated?
Not at all. I would have no concern walking down the street past a person who's not been vaccinated, and even a person who's been infected, because the protection is really quite substantial.
Well, whether you're working in a supermarket to make sure you have been vaccinated so you're not spreading anything to anyone else, or you're not likely to get the virus.
The primary endpoint on which the 95% efficacy was determined was based on the prevention of clinically recognizable disease.
Now we know that the vaccines work well enough that the virus stops with every vaccinated person. A vaccinated person gets exposed to the virus does not infect them, the virus cannot then use that person to go anywhere else.
I don't have her exact words in front of me. The president was saying, if you get vaccinated, it stops the virus. All the language implied that we were the ones endangering everyone, endangering children, endangering grandma. So it's a very demonic set of lies, Tucker, because people who, threw the first responders and firefighters and police officers under the bus, or the soldiers and the sailors, did so believing that we were the ones harming society.
Yes.
And that they were being good. And that also by submitting themselves to these injections, they were, that was the language. The language was actually, Yale was where they did the focus groups. They took the money from HHS and they did the focus groups, finding out the propaganda bullet points that liberals respond to most. And they were altruistic. They were like, do the right thing for society.
Right.
Okay, here,
Well, they leverage your best qualities, and those are a person's best qualities. Altruism is your best quality, and they took that and used it against us.
Yeah, but also, I get this point in my kind of how did this all happen internal monologue, and then I think, just like you, these are smart people. Read a book.
Well, that's
do some digging.
of course I
Primary
completely
source
agree. And the
documents.
reason I'm pressing you on this is because I don't know the answer myself, and I've been brooding on it for a couple of years now. I suspect it's a more core variable. I think it may have to do with how healthy your personal life is.
Mm.
I do think that people I know who had healthy marriages, respectful, happy, those people were less susceptible.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So while all of this was going on, and I remember very well watching a lot of surprise as you went from being, kind of a celebrated person to being an enemy,
Mm-hmm.
and watching CIA-controlled Wikipedia write that into history, your sins. I wondered, are any of your friends reaching out to you offline, privately, to say, I'm with you, or?
Oh, it's sadder than that. No one has ever said, I behaved abominably, I'm so sorry.
No, one person's ever said that?
Not one. No.
Whoa.
However, this is so heartbreaking. I don't want to throw my friends under the bus, but what the form it takes, this is what will happen to me typically. I've started to be invited back to some of the parties that I got dramatically excluded from. And I'll go because I want to build bridges and,
Yes.
Heal society and all
See
that.
old friends?
See old
Yeah.
friends, certainly. It's not like I don't go back with emotions, but I
Yes.
go back. And I'll just be standing there and people will come up to me without even introducing themselves, tell me their symptoms. They'll say, I have blood clots in my legs, or my grandfather just passed from a triple heart attack. They'll just share their symptoms. And so I feel like people are waking up, and I don't need an apology. I don't, because this isn't about me. It's about something much more important. But I feel like if society will ever heal that emerging awareness that something catastrophic happened, people have to understand that something catastrophic happened in order to heal. And I do see that happening.
It does feel like on an individual level, I also hear that because I wasn't vaxxed and said so. And so maybe people feel comfortable if they know, where you stand on that. And I'm not very judgy, so I'll sit and listen.
Right.
But I have not heard one acknowledgement outside of, interviews I've done with people, but more broadly, society-wide, I haven't heard any public official even refer to it.
No. In fact, there's a section in Facing the Beast that goes into that. It's like the phrase is move on. When you go back to Brooklyn or to New York now, the, those elite circles, or the circles where the culture is being produced, or even where politics is being produced, except, the outside figures with whom I talk to these days, the consensus is almost like this massive amnesia, or probably like Germany after, in 1946, like, let's just move on. Let's not discuss it. Like there's a section in Facing the Beast where I go into a bookstore in Brooklyn, a good one, Jackson McNally. And there's like not a book by the experts on racial disparities in education about brown and black children being left behind for 2 years and falling back academically in ways that are unlikely to recover in their lifetimes. There's, from feminists, there's not a book about how women lost all the gains they made in the workforce because they had to go home and look after children who are chained to computers. The doctors, the health section, nothing about the vast documentation now of the injuries and sterilizations and deaths, resulting from these mRNA injections, or nothing about treatments. The people like Robert Reich, don't talk about the biggest transfer of assets in living history as, small businesses, small landlords couldn't compete, had to close their shops, had to, sell their properties off at fire sale prices. BlackRock and Vanguard scooped up the properties, and,
now we have a renter society.
Sorry?
Now we have a renter
society. Exactly. And all the liberal economists are not talking about that at all, not a word. And so weirdly, I'm having the most important conversations of my life with libertarians and conservatives and independents, because the whole societal superstructure won't process what happened because they were complicit.
Yeah, they're implicated in it, in the